And welcome back to another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports podcast where I, Richard Harris, talk about why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s. Today's topic is football and the topic of coaching. Play calling in particular. I don't know if you've watched the games this past weekend in college and in the pros and came away with the same impression that I came away with. First, Colorado decides they're going to change their coordinator, their offensive coordinator, and promote someone within the program to try to jumpstart their offense. If you've noticed in all of Colorado's last 3 games that they've lost, and the fact they've only won 1 of their last 5 games, what is the same common denominator? The common denominator in all those games is they're letting that kid, Shedeur Sanders, get killed. They can't protect him. They can't block for him. And he's standing back there running for his life, hiding for his life, and getting hit like he is a tackling dummy. Deion Sanders point blank said, "We have to run the football." Do Colorado run the football? No, never. They try it gets stuffed, and then they're done. They try it again, it gets stuffed, they're done. His son has become basically John Elway in this respect. John Elway's famous for comebacks. And so what's happening is Colorado is getting down big in games, and they are magically all of a sudden coming back and killing the bookies all over America, or killing the people who are betting against them all over America because they are down by 20, down by 30, down by 15, and they are the king of the backdoor cover because all of a sudden they start making plays. USC is this offensive juggernaut. The reigning Heisman Trophy player is on their team, and he orchestrates this offense. But every game that USC loses, they lose because of the same reason. If you look back to last year's losses, they are running the football down the throats of Utah in both of the games, down the throat of Tulane in that game. And then they decide, that's too easy. Let's throw it. Let's showcase Caleb. You look at the losses this year. Ran the ball well first couple drives against Notre Dame. Stopped running and started throwing it every down. The Utah loss again. Running the ball a little bit. All of a sudden they say, we're running it too much. We need to throw it. Last night's loss to Washington. Running the football just fine. They start throwing it all over the place. And what I don't understand, and this goes way back to me, to the Super Bowl between the Patriots and the Atlanta Falcons, when the Falcons were up 28-3 in the third quarter, completely in total control. And essentially could not put the game away with a running game, could not, for some reason, go back to the plays that they ran that got them that lead. And that's the one thing I have never, ever understood about football in this era. I remember when it was Green Bay and Denver in the Super Bowl, and they had the sidelines mic'd, and the Packers were going for a repeat, and Elway and the boys took the lead. And by the way, Terrell Davis ran all over Green Bay in that Super Bowl. And so Denver takes the lead 31-24. And Favre comes out, he hits a couple passes, and they put the mics on the sideline, and he's looking at John Fox, and Shanahan is like, what defense are we playing? And he starts to say, he wants to say prevent, but he doesn't want to say it. And Shanahan's like, get out of that damn defense. We've shut them down all day long playing a specific style, and you want to you want to change it to prevent? And they got out of that style, and they stopped the Packers, and they won the game. So you say, what does that mean? What that means to me is I watch these football games, and I see the teams dominating, running it all day and night. Why do they stop running it? In the 80s and 90s, they ran the football till the dude couldn't walk. And it's sad on some regards, and it's life in other regards, but that's the way it was. Earl Campbell may have never won a Super Bowl, never got to a Super Bowl. But the Houston Oilers knew for them to win, he had to be dominant. And so they would give him the ball, even if they were down 20-0. And he would break one. Then he'd break another one. Then all of a sudden it's 20-14. They stuck to who they were. The New York Football Giants stayed true to who they were. While the 49ers were high tech and doing all this wonderful stuff with the West Coast offense, one of the principles of the West Coast offense was to run the football. And they did. And they did. And they did. Ricky Running Waters, Roger Craig ran wild. He should be in the Hall of Fame. But the Giants, the Washington football team, the Dallas Cowboys knew how to win games. They ran it. They looked at their offensive linemen and said, look, they're starting to come back on us a little bit. Let's put the hammer down. Let's run the football. Troy Aikman said one time that the Cowboys had, there's one play they always ran to. And I wish I remember the exact play, but what it was the deep end that he used to throw to Michael Irvin. Whenever they were in trouble, they had a play that they could go to that always worked. I remember one time the Giants were playing the Cowboys, and the Giants were down 38-7, and the Giants rallied and got it to 38-35, and the Cowboys were basically treading water, and they couldn't stop Giants, and so Giants defense stepped up for a bunch of drives, and there was one drive left. And they ran that deep in, and they got the first down, and that ended the game. So you say you're mixing up your points. No, I'm not mixing my points. My points are simple. You do what works. What works wins. Throwing it all over the ball yard doesn't work all the time. If you're running it well, run it well. I got up this morning. I'm watching the Kansas City Dolphins game, and Kansas City's up 21-0. And then Miami says, all right, that's the first half. Let's start over, and let's try to make something happen in the second half. Let's run the football. They start running it, have some success. All of a sudden, it's 21-14. They get the key stop in the game. So now they have the ball with a chance to drive down the field and either tie it or go for two and win it. First play, 25-yard run. Second play, 19-yard run. They're over the 40-yard line already. And if you're sitting at home, you're gripping your seat and you're like, oh my God, Kansas City might lose this game. What did they do on the next three plays? Pass to the flat, incomplete. Pass in the middle, incomplete. Next play, incomplete. Next play, he fumbles, game over. And you go, what the heck just happened? You just ran for 44 yards And then all of a sudden, you don't want to run no more? I'm watching the Giants-Raiders game. The Giants come out. Saquon gets a few good runs in a row. I guess he got hurt, so they took him out the game, so they brought in Breida. Referees ripped us off on the 4th and 1 call. Clearly a first down. For some reason, they said he was short. We come back out again, and we're throwing the ball. What happens? Daniel Jones tweaks his knee, stays in one more play, hurts his knee. Bring in the kid off the bench. He throws 2 picks back-to-back plays. Why? You were running the football. Why'd you stop running the football? Then you look at the other side of the ball. The Raiders running all over the Giants. Jacobs is killing us. Washington yesterday against USC had a running back run for over 250 yards. That's not Washington's calling card, but it was working, so they did. Cal USC's game last week. Cal running all over the place against USC. Then all of a sudden, Cal decides, let's throw it. What happens? Fumble, snap. USC gets the ball. Let's throw it again. Hit, fumble. USC gets the ball. Let's throw it again. Interception. They lose 50-49. Why? Because trying to be too cute. Why? Because they had a formula that was working and they decided against the formula. In the 80s and 90s, that wasn't the case. If you look at all the successful teams of that era, and now when I mean by successful, I'm not necessarily talking about the Super Bowl champions, but obviously I could say the Super Bowl champions because the Raiders ran the football, Marcus Allen. Washington ran the football, John Riggins, George Rogers. The Giants, Joe Morris, Rodney Hampton. Cowboys, Tony Dorsett, Emmitt Smith. Chicago Bears, Walter Payton. The Rams, Eric Dickerson and Jerome Bettis. The Steelers, Bettis, Barry Foster, Bad Morris. The Buffalo Bills, Thurman Thomas, Kenneth Davis. And the year that Ricky Williams wasn't getting in trouble with weed, Ricky Williams ran well for Miami. The Saints, Dalton Hilliard. I can throw name after name after name after name of good run. That's funny. Today you can't even name 10 running backs because teams don't run the football. Derrick Henry gets going in Tennessee, you know the game is over because you can't stop him because you don't want to get in front of him. And Ezekiel Elliott was with the Cowboys. They were successful when they gave him the football. When they stopped giving him the football and let Dak do the thing, they don't win big games. That's not the Cowboys' tradition. The Cowboys' tradition has always been, we have a running back, and he is going to run down your throat. You go back to the 70s with that. Dwayne Thomas, Calvin Hill, Tony Dorsett, Preston Pearson, Robert Newhouse. Because a formula worked. And when the formula works, you win. Now, people say, well, what do you say about Kansas City Chiefs? Watch Kansas City play. Kansas City runs the football a lot more than you think they do. They throw the ball to the tight end because he gets open. But today, he had 3 catches for 14 yards. This kid Pacheco is running all over the place. But also watch Kansas City and say, why aren't they blowing anybody out anymore? Not blowing anybody out because teams know that they're not going to stick to the running game. Teams know they're going to throw it as number one option and then run it. And Mahomes is fallible. He can be hit he can fumble and he can throw picks. And so my simple point is I don't understand when I watch a football game, when I'm watching a team run. The Oregon State game, Colorado last night. Oregon State running the ball down Colorado's throat. What does Oregon State want to do? If they get stopped on first down and it's 2nd and 9, and 2nd and 10, because they try to run it, then they throw it the next 2 plays. Then their drive is done. But when they're running the football, like they were, they score touchdowns. They set up things to score touchdowns. And then, of course, when the game was on the line, what did they do? They ran the football. 3 plays in a row. Ended the game. That's old school football. That's the way football has always been. If something is work, you work it until you can't work it no more. That's the beauty. When I played quarterback, we had the same play on the right side, same play on the left side. And if we were running it well on the right side, we kept running it on the right side. And if you stopped it, okay, we'll flop it and do it to the left side. So you stop it there. That's not common sense anymore. That's not football anymore. Football is we run the ball, now we got to throw it 3 times to keep them off balance. And not realizing that they're off balance because you just ran the ball down their throats. So now they have to think. They got to say to themselves, are they going to run it again or are they going to throw it? I don't understand what happened with smart football people. I don't understand what happened to smart thought processes. And it's not just the teams that I mentioned. Sometimes your best running back is your quarterback in college, and I get it. And you don't want him to be subjected to vicious hits all the time. I get it. As happened in the LSU Alabama game last night. It was a great game. It was 28-28. And then Jaden went back to pass, and he got absolutely nailed. It was a penalty. But he was running the football. They couldn't stop him. That was always the weakness of every defense in football. You can stop the passing game. You can stop the running game. But you can't stop the running game with the quarterback involved. That's what made Michael Vick effective. That's what made Donovan McNabb effective. Because you couldn't account for him. No matter what you did, you couldn't account for him. Because they were too elusive. Lamar Jackson's that way today. But the difference between Lamar Jackson and Donovan McNabb, Michael Vick, is Donovan McNabb and Michael Vick could play in the pocket as pro-style quarterbacks. Michael Vick can play, but just not as good as they did. Simple as that. When you play against the Ravens, you know he's going to run. As opposed to when you played against the Eagles, Donovan McNabb could light you up 35 for 45 for 450 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's the difference. So can Michael Vick. I had Lamar Jackson today in fantasy. Of course, I'm the kiss of death. And what does he do? He goes something really, respectable, something like 18 out of 27 or something really good percentage-wise, but no touchdown pass, 180 yards passing. I'm totally digressing. And they won, obviously, 37-3. So obviously that strategy worked. But they ran the football. They didn't need to run the football. They wanted to establish something, and they stuck with what they established, and they just kept doing it. And that's what I don't get from some of the teams that I watch. You're doing great, doing something, and then all of a sudden, I don't want to do it no more. Let's throw it. I don't want to block. I don't want, I don't want this to happen. So let's just throw it. And then we lose. That's the new football. The new basketball is a three-point shot. The new football is throwing it all the time when you don't need to throw all the time. Every announcer in basketball says the same thing. They're like, well, in the new basketball, on a 3-on-1 fast break, they don't go to the rim. They go to the corners for threes. And they're correct. Well, in the new football, you run for 10 yards, you run for 9 yards, and in the next 5 plays, you throw it. And then you wonder why you can't hold leads, and you wonder why your team is ineffective. You wonder why your offensive line has no confidence. Offensive linemen get confident when they run block. Not when they're pass protecting. They want to hit somebody. They're tired of being run into and being hit. So as you watch the rest of this football season, watch that when you're watching the games. When you're sitting at home saying, didn't we just run for 15 yards? Didn't we just run for 20 yards? Why are we throwing it? Kansas City ran the same play 2 times, not Kansas City, Miami 2 times in a row. Off tackle left, got 44 yards and said, all right, now let's try to win the game. Instead of running the ball down the throat to Kansas City, who was probably playing more of a pass defense than run. That's why it worked. And if I can see that sitting at home, why can't they see that at their own games? 8 weeks to go.